and welcome to Margaret Lewin Quilting. Today I'm going to talk to you all about putting borders on a quilt. This is my melanoma quilt, which I made using Moda Fabrics Breast Cancer Awareness Quilt pattern. I did mine in grunges, thatched, and a couple of other prints from Moda, not many. Most of it is thatched and grunge, and I'm thrilled with the way it came out. But I think it needs a little something extra. So what I'm going to be doing is putting two borders on. I've got my border fabric here all cut out. I'm going to be using the grunge fabric called Black Dress. And let me lay it next to it so you can see it. And I'm also going to be using the white grunge that we use throughout this quilt as the background fabric. So this is what my, I just want to grab one of these. This is what my border is going to look like. So we're going to have a layer of the white and then the black. And I'm very happy with the way that looks. I think it's going to be very striking. One of the things I'm also going to be doing is I'm going to be mitering my corners, which is a little different than what I do a lot of times. I tend to really like mitered corners, and sometimes people struggle with them. And honestly, once you've done a few of them, they become pretty repetitive and not difficult. I do have a video, and I'll link it in the cards up above. I'm not sure which side they show up on, but I'll link it in the cards. It's making placemats, and by the time you get done making the 6 placemats, you've got mitered corners down pat. So I'll put that up in the note card so that you can take a look at that. But in the meantime, today I want to talk to you about putting borders on and measuring correctly for borders. One of the things that happen when quilters get to this stage, that they're ready to finish up their quilts, and I know this because I am definitely, I want to set that aside, I am definitely a quilter that does that. By the time I get to this point, I want to get my borders on. I want to get it on the long arm, which is what I'm standing behind right now. I have a Gamel Statler, and so that's what I'm standing behind while I show you the quilt. So I am guilty of definitely, I want to get it on my long arm and I want to finish it because I want to see it done. Well, you really do need to take a stand back and measure for your borders correctly. How you measure for your borders is to lay your quilt down as flat as you possibly can wherever you've got a flat surface. I've been known to measure mine on the floor. I'll measure it on the bed. Now I many times end up using my long arm to put the quilt across. When I put the quilt across the long arm, I tend to measure down there on the back bed. And the reason why I do is because I can lay that really flat and lay the rest of the quilt across my long arm to be able to get it measured correctly. You're going to measure it in 3 spots. You're going to measure it across the bottom, you're going to measure it across the center, and you're going to measure it across the top. You add those 3 numbers together and divide it by 3. That is the width of your border strip, okay? Then you're going to turn your quilt around. Then you're going to measure once again from one side, the middle, and the other side. Add those 3 numbers together, divide it by 3, and that is the length of your quilt. Now I know it takes extra time to do that, and I know that it can be very frustrating, and the last thing that you want to do is to do that, but believe me, it's really important that you do. So I'm going to go ahead and get my fabric sewn together. I am going to sew my whites and blacks together because I am mitering my corners, so I can do that at this time. But for right now, I'm going to get my quilt measured, get my borders cut, get them sewn together, and then I'll be back. I have sewn a couple of strips of fabric together. You can see these are my borders. This is going to be where the quilt is. There's going to be a white border and then the black border. So I measured the quilt in the Quilt averages out to 60.5 inches by 73.5 inches. So I'm going to first do the top and the bottom of the quilt, and these are my borders to do that. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of these pieces of fabric. I'm going to lay these out and I'm going to find my center. And I'm just lining them up as best I can so that I can find that center point, because that center point is going to be really important for me. Whoops, I should have done it the other way. I'm going to put right sides together and fold it. It's the better way to do it. And I'm just matching up my ends so that I can find that center point. Once I find that center point, I'm going to make a mark so that I can use that as my center, because we need to measure from the center out. Because I'm doing mitered corners, it's important that we know exactly where our center is so that we can measure properly out. So right here's my center. I'm going to start by putting a pin in there, and I've just folded it. Going to stick that pin right in. Then I'm going to open it up. Once I get it open, I know this is my center. I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to mark that center point, lining my ruler up with my stitched line and lining up where the pin is, and I'm just going to make a mark right across. Now, because I've got white here, I'm not going to see that chalk mark as well, but I absolutely can see it on the black, so that's what I care about. The next measurement that I need is one that will represent the 60.5, so the entire width. So if I take this piece from the center out, what I need is, what, 30.25. So if I've got 60.5, half of 60.5 is 30.25. So I lay my ruler, my measuring tape down, and I'm going to do it all the way out, and look, I'm right there at 30.25. I might be a little bit too much, so I'm going to just take it in right to there. Okay, so that's my first one. That's 30.25. Now let's do our second one. So here comes our second one at 30.25. Measuring tape down. I'm gonna go all the way out here. Oh, and I am off camera. I'm sorry. Let me pull it down. All right, I'm gonna pull it right down to here to 30.25 again. Right. Now, when I go to attach this, 30.25 will take me all the way to the end. That means that I need to stop 1/4 of an inch before I hit to here. So now I'm going to take my larger ruler and I'm going to line up my quarter mark, and I'm going to line up my fabric so that I'm nice and straight. Good thing to use on this would be your stitch line, and I can see my mark right there. That should be at the end of my quilt. I'm going to move it in so that my white mark lines up with my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. And now I'm going to draw a line all the way across. And what this line represents is where I need to stop stitching. Now we're going to do the other side. Exact same thing. We need to measure in 1/4 of an inch. Because we're going to miter these corners, we have to stop 1/4 of an inch before we get to the end of the quilt. So I'm going to again measure, making certain that I'm as straight as I can possibly be. It was that line. I'm doing pretty good here. Okay, so again, that's where I have to stop. So next I'm going to measure my quilt. I know my quilt at the top and the bottom is 30 and a half. I gotta find where my top and bottom is. Here's my top. We'll start with the top. So I'm gonna start by marking these by folding them in half. Once I've folded them in half, I will mark my center. I'm going to move this right out of my way. Once I've marked my center, I'm going to do the exact same thing. This time, because we know the math, I'm going to mark out exactly 30 inches because before we did it 30 and a quarter. I know I have to stop a quarter of an inch before I reach the edge. I can also take one of my friction markers to double check myself, and I can draw a line at each corner that is a quarter of an inch in. But what we want to do is we want to distribute any fullness across the whole thing. So we're still going to go ahead and measure, and we're still going to mark it. And I'll show you why when we get farther into this. So I know we have to stop a quarter of an inch before we get to the end. All right, I've marked my center. Here, where's my center? This way. Yep, there's my center. See my pin? I'm going to lay this out. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to measure out from my center, just double checking myself here. And what should happen when I hit 30 and a quarter, straighten this pin a little bit, I should be at my mark down here. At my mark down there. Okay, so I'm going to lay my tape measure at 30. And I'm just going to move it. Here we go. And look, I'm a nice quarter of an inch away. Maybe a little bit more than a quarter, but boy, not much. All right? So I am good to go. Here's my quarter. So how I'm going to pin this to sew it on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to match up my centers. And I know that right here is my center. I'm going to match it center to center. And I'm going to pin. Okay. Good strong pin in there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my mark that I made. Get you right on center camera. Right here, that is to be a quarter of an inch away from the end. Because remember, I have to stop 1/4 of an inch before I get to the end. And it's kind of hard to see my quarter all the way across. So I'm going to bring in a secondary ruler, making certain that it's flat and marking it this way. Just so that I know I'm straight. I can see it, but I want you to see it too. Alright, I'm going to take that pin and I'm going to line it up with this mark on this side. So I've got my 2/4 of an inch lined right up. See? Now what I can do is continue to pin this all the way down, starting at what I see with my eyes to be approximately the center. Bring these two pieces together and pin it. Then I'm going to bring these two pieces together and I'm going to pin it again. Then I'm going to go halfway in between this, pin it again. And what this will do is distribute any fullness that we may potentially have in the quilt. It will make it so much easier when you go to quilt it. And now I'm doing the exact same thing again. Finding approximately the center, pinning, and then pinning again. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the bottom of the quilt and then the two sides. So I measure the quilt in 3 spots, divide that number by 3, and that's exactly how long my borders need to be. Because I'm going to miter my borders, I need additional fabric on each end, which means that I have to stop stitching when I am 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So we took our full width measurement, divided it in half, and subtracted 1/4. That told us where we have to stop stitching. All right? To attach the 2 pieces together, we started at the center in one end. We distributed the fabric between the 2 points, pinned it. Now I'm going to go from my center to my other end, do the exact same thing. I'll do the same thing when it comes to the bottom of the quilt and the 2 sides. Once I do that, I will be back with all 4 sides of my quilt put together. And the last thing that I will need to do is show you how to actually miter the borders. And I'll be back to show you how to do that in just a few minutes. I have attached my borders, not binding, my borders, and you can see they're both on there. I did press them. I pressed them towards the borders. And now I'm going to mark. The next thing I need to do is mark them for the 45 degree. So I'm going to take one piece and just push that one aside. Then I'm going to take the other piece and I'm going to lay it out straight as I can. Okay. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to use the 45 degree line right here. See it? And I'm going to move it towards you with hopes that that light does not glare. All right. So I'm going to take my 45 degree and I'm going to put it down on the border itself. So I'm way down here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my seam allowance here, I'm going to press it up. And I can see my stitch mark and where I ended right here. I know on camera you're not going to be able to see it, but it is right here. I'll make a little pen mark. Hopefully now you can see it. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to put that on that dot. And then I'm going to take my 45 degree and I'm going to line it up with my fabric here. I'm going to take a pen. This is one of the friction pens. I moved it a little bit. And I'm going to draw on the white, and then I'm going to need my Choco marker for the black because the purple just doesn't show through. Right? So I've done that one. Next I'm going to turn my fabric and I'm going to do that on this side. Same thing. Just move this fabric out of the way. I'm going to try to flatten this out a little bit better. Alright, I'm going to fold this fabric back and I can see that I ended right, trying to see, right here is my end mark. Lay my fabric out nice and straight, trying not to pull it too much. Well, I'm going to have to flip a little more. Hang on, here we go. Alright, I think that's better. Alright, so I'm going to move this fabric right out of the way. I'm going to take this fabric. I'm going to lay it down. I see my mark right there. I'm going to get my ruler and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm lining my 45 degree line up with the fabric, then double checking up here to make sure that I am on my stitch mark up there. And I am. and I'm going to do a white mark on the black, and I'm going to do a purple mark on the white. All right. Now I'm going to take these two pieces, grab the white, and I can just fold the fabric in half. So I've got it's folded in half here, and I've got both of my borders here. So now I can just take straight pins, and I can pin these two together, making certain that they are lined up, and if they are not, I'll make adjustments to make sure that they do line up. Okay, so it looks like I need to come up from the bottom so that I can move this over just a little bit. Okay, there's my first pin. I'm going to make sure, see, I came right up there again. All right, now I'm going to come down here farther and do the same thing. There's one pin, and I'm going to line it right up with that. Make sure that I'm maintaining being straight as I can. All right, now I'm going to stick my pin in. And let's bring it right up on the line. Then we'll turn it over and check and see I'm a little bit off. So now I'm just going to make that adjustment. What I'm going to do is just bring it over a little bit, and let's try it again. See if I can go down and then back up again. Much better. Look at how nice that is. All right, so now what I can do is check one more spot up here. See how I do when I flip this over. Pretty good, not perfect though. So I'm going to go a little bit farther, and then I'm going to try it again. And there I go. Much better. Okay, so now I can pin right across these in a few different places. I'm going to start right up here, put a pin, put another one, and one more. And then I'll turn this one. So now what I'm going to do is start right here at the quilt and just stitch a straight line down to here, back stitching in both spots. Once I've done that, I will do my very last border, and then we are done mitering the corners of this quilt, and it is ready for its final press and to go on the long arm. And I will come back and show you a picture of it as soon as it's ready. Here it is. You can see the quilt in all of its glory. As soon as I've got it quilted, I'll give you some really good pictures. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll answer them just as soon as I can. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.